Hi everyone, Holly from Safe for Kids here. It's my absolute pleasure today to introduce you to somebody that I've been following on social media for quite some time, Jeremy, who just blows me away. He tells his story of what happened to him when he was a child. And so I've invited him on today to talk with us about his story and how he was groomed by a neighbour. So Jeremy, thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me on. Thank you.
So where would you like to start?
So if we want to cover the topic of grooming, let's use my story as an example, and then I feel like we can go from there.
Sounds perfect.
So for anybody that's listening that has never heard my story before, I was successfully groomed as an 8-year-old boy by a neighbor, by a close family friend who was trusted by the family. And it's actually very interesting in some way to look back and see how manipulated and brainwashed I was by this man. And when we say man, he was 25 years old. He was a nurse. He was an unsuspecting member of society. Even now, in hindsight, there was nothing that would have told you that he had this perversion in his head. And he was, like I say, he was a trusted member of the family. He was in the home at times, at family events, etc. And he took a liking to me, and I took a liking to him because he was older. He was 25, I was 8. He was cool to me. We'd play video games, we kicked the football around. He was no threat at all to me. Now, obviously, nobody knew he had this perversion in his head. He took a liking to me, and he introduced me to sexual activity. Now, obviously, I was 8 years old, so I cannot account every individual time that we did anything. I cannot even really account how this progressively happened. I was 8 years old. You don't remember those things. You only now remember, now that I'm 36, when you look back at your childhood in that era, you only remember certain events. You don't remember everything, of course. But we can safely say that it would have been a very gradual process, because I remember the extreme things that we were doing, the sexual activity, and it was no surprise. It never came as a surprise to me. So when we were doing something naked, it wasn't like, oh my God, we're doing something naked. It was like he had brought me on, he had taught me, he had introduced me stage by stage. Now, again, we could say maybe it would just be a touch on the leg. And maybe then it would be an arm around my shoulder. And if he ever saw that I felt a little uncomfortable at that, maybe he would let me know that this is what good friends do. And if we tell anybody, then our friendship will be broken. Now, that is, when I put it like that, I hope anybody that's listening that thinks this could never happen to my child can see how easy it is to manipulate a child. Let's say somebody under 10. I mean, of course, the obvious thing is you could buy them something, and they're yours. You can befriend a child very easily, and you can get them to do what you want very easily. You can fabricate a story around it and say that, like this guy did to me, we would be better friends if you did this. Other children do this, they just don't tell you because it's everybody's secret. Do you want to be a good boy? Well, why don't you do this? Oh, the best boys do this. You see how easy that is, The child's nature is very fragile and vulnerable. But let me add something to that. A child's nature is very fragile and vulnerable if we haven't equipped them with the tools and the knowledge to understand it. Of course they're naive because they don't know. So the sexual activity that me and this man were engaging in went to very horrific levels, and then it finished because he moved out of the area. And then I just returned back to my life, my usual life. I was energetic, confident, very social young boy. I was doing very well at school. I was a little bit of a cheeky lad. Now, you would have never, ever, ever known that this had happened to me. We need to, again, break these stereotypes of any child that's ever been abused is sitting in the corner of the room, got no friends, can't speak, not doing very well at school. We need to get rid of that, because I think that's very rarely the case, actually. Signs of abuse are not obvious. Sometimes they never surface. With me, they never did. I was captain of the rugby team. I was captain of the football team. I was a high achiever. I was outspoken. I had many friends. I even asked the people who knew me in those ages, while I was being abused and afterwards, some of my friends who were friends with me at that time, whose parents know me very well because we've been connected throughout all of that time, I even say to them now that you know what happened in my childhood, can you think when I was 12, 14, 16, 18, can you now, in hindsight, look at who I was and think, yeah, there were some signs? And all of them say no. All of them say no. So the conclusion of all of that is we need to work hard to prevent this from happening. We all need to understand that there is a risk. There is always a risk, but there are things that we can do to minimize this risk and do our best to give the children the tools and the knowledge to protect themselves. For anybody that thinks that this would never happen to my child, yes, it would never happen to your child if you're going to follow them around everywhere that they go. If you're going to actually physically look at them and follow them everywhere that they go, that's one way that you're going to keep 100% risk.
Including the toilets at school.
Including the toilets at school. But of course, that's absolutely impossible because at school, you're not there, right? At the friend's sleepover, you're not there. At the sports club, you're not there. In the playground, you're not there, right? So let's give them the tools and the knowledge. That seems sensible. I don't think anybody's denying that that's not a sensible approach. We do it with everything else. We do it with the stranger danger thing. We do it with the say no to drugs. We do it with every other bit of education because we know we need to equip that child for the times when we're not there so that they can protect themselves. So.
You're so right. Lots of people, I come against criticism, teaching protective education to children is wrong. It's not up to a 5-year-old to keep themselves safe. It's adults' jobs, and they're right. But for me, children are the last line of defense. If we don't equip them with these tools, and we know that most abuse is by somebody that's known and possibly loved by the children, if we don't equip them, then, as you said, parents can't be there 24/7. And so it's not about taking away their innocence. Lots of people say, oh, you're taking away children's innocence. No, we're empowering them because knowledge is power. And without that knowledge that somebody, nobody should be touching your private parts, and the importance of knowing the correct anatomical names, that alone could be a protective factor. The work that you're doing in this area is phenomenal. And I'll share in the show notes 2 of my favorite resources that you've created, especially the cartoon that you made of your story. I just wish it was used in curriculums around the world, because thank you for making it, first of all, and being so open and honest sharing it. But it's done so well, and it doesn't have to be frightening. We're not being the boogeyman or we're not trying to frighten children. We're doing it in an age-appropriate way with language that they understand to empower them.
Absolutely. Age appropriate is definitely the thing we need to get across. We're not talking about intercourse with a 5-year-old, right? Because it's not their world. It's not their nature. They're nowhere near there. But to draw a picture of a man and a woman and circle the areas that are private could be a nice way to introduce children to body awareness and body safety. The quote that goes around so much, which I know frustrates many of us, about this ruining their innocence. Okay, let's say that was correct. I don't believe that that's correct, because if it's done in an age-appropriate way, like you say, it's an empowering conversation of education and information. You're teaching, they're learning, it's empowering. But if, let's say, for a moment, I'm going to accept that it is ruining their innocence, well, wouldn't you rather do that than sit down with them when they're 25 and them tell you that something was going on in the house with so-and-so, it lasted a number of years, and they're so sorry, but they could never tell you because they didn't understand it was wrong? If you're having a conversation like that with your child when they're an adult, as a parent, that would rip your life apart. You will never recover from that conversation. And then all of a sudden, those little awkward conversations when they were children that you felt were unnecessary, now you see how important that they were. We talk to children about strangers. Let's take this as an example. We tell a 5-year-old, don't talk to strangers. They're dangerous. They'll take you away. They'll take you away from mummy. They'll take you away from daddy. Do you think that that's scary for a child? I think that is probably the most frightening conversation that a 5-year-old could ever hear. They wouldn't even be able to compute it. But we understand that it's a necessary conversation. We know that that's very, very important, that the 5-year-old knows not to be led away by a stranger. So we give that information with the risk of scaring them / ruining their innocence. Now you take the private area conversation. Even if you don't want to use the proper names for parts, sexual organs, let's just call them private areas. They're yours. Nobody's to touch them. If anybody does, if anybody asks to touch them, you let mummy and daddy know. If anybody asks you to touch theirs, you just let mummy and daddy know. End of education, right? Not end of education. It's a continuous process, but that's the first conversation. Now let's just compare that conversation I just detailed there about private areas, the soft conversation compared to the stranger danger conversation. Which one's more scary for a child? The stranger danger conversation, quite clearly. But we're happy to give that, and we need to give that, I agree. So why are we not also having the other conversation?
Spot on. Oh, I'm loving this. This is so, we're so on the same page. You know, the amount of, the bane of my life, and I know it's something that you're looking into, is to go into schools and deliver education eventually. Whenever I go into schools, and so last year I taught my program to 3,600 children.
Wow.
And then I go in, I train the teachers to continue the program once I leave, and always try and do a parent workshop. Getting parents along to a free 2-hour parent workshop is near on impossible. So I need to give you the heads up about that, because that is one of the things that will, you know, out of all the frustrations that you've had, that'll be the one that, you know, you want to really look into, because you know, parents don't think it's going to happen to their child. I'm a good parent, you know, or I trust all our friends and all of this stuff. And, you know, we don't want to be the voice of doom and gloom, but we know the reality. We know the statistics. You're a survivor of it. And so you've have lived experience around it. So I mean, I bet your parents never thought it would happen to you.
Of course.
And so, you know, to have these conversations, I'm hoping that, you know, I'll be plastering it everywhere, as I'm sure you will be. But, you know, I'm not trying to parent shame, but I need parents to get on board. And even if I've actually, and again, for your, when you get into schools and things, I've actually changed the way that I put on my flyers. I used to put up the horrible statistics of child abuse. I've even tried free wine and cheese, and that didn't get them in. But now on my flyers, I have, would you know what to say to a child if child's best friend came to you and said they'd been abused.
Excellent.
It's almost along the lines of it takes a village, because it's never going to happen to my kid, but oh gosh, I better go to that talk, because if my kid's friend, it happened to them, I wouldn't know what to say.
Amazing.
So we've tried to flip it, and I'm happy for you to use that in any way that you can, because, you know, we have to look out for all children. One of the things that I do with children is we help them set up a safety team of 5 adults that they can talk to. Children are not likely to tell a parent straight up if something happened. It may be, I don't have children myself, but, you know, over the years, I've had my nieces and nephews come and tell me stuff that I really don't want to know, but I'm the cool aunt. And so they come to me. So whether you're a grandparent, an aunt, a next door neighbor, you are going to be on children's safety teams. So you need to go and educate yourself. Heaven forbid, if a child discloses. I've had adults come up after my workshops and say, Holly, I wish I had have known this when I was a child. It happened to me, but now I know this and I can teach this to my child. But I've also had adults say, Holly, I told my mum and she totally ignored me, or said I was lying. For a child, when they actually disclose, the initial disclosure, how it's received, is so important. So I've actually just had a graphic designer design up a poster of giving people, and I'll put that in the show notes as well. It'll be on my website for free, but it's to help adults know exactly what to say. I actually give adults a script to say, I'm glad you told me. I believe you. It's not your fault. And we're going to do something about it. Because, and you have to stay calm. But if you know those 4 sentences by rote, and then, because if a child comes to you and says, oh, you know, the boy next door did blah, 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 and you go, oh, or even worse, I'm going to bloody kill him. The child's, they're going to shut down. They're not going to want to say. So inside, a parent might be freaking out, but they have to stay calm. And if they know those 4 sentences and just rattle them off, hopefully by then they can have taken a deep breath and then follow procedure and making the disclosure to the right authorities.
That approach that you've got there is really, really good, because that touches on a nice part of human nature where we do care for all children, and then it's not pointing the finger so much at the person's child. And that's a really good way of doing it. And like you say, when you originally put the statistics up on your flyer, I don't know. This is such a tough subject. It's uncomfortable for us all. It's not nice to look at. It makes everybody feel uncomfortable. And so trying to come at it from different approaches is what we need, because the approaches so far that we've been using throughout history, or recent times, should I say, are not working. They're just not working. So I feel like your approach on your flyers, the change of your approach is excellent. And that's just from how you've learned, isn't it, along the way. It's just similar to what I'm trying to do here with all the work that I'm putting out on my YouTube channel and my social media accounts. I'm trying to get people to think, and I'm trying to get them to see that everybody's got a part to play in this, whether that be you've got children of your own and opening conversations in the home, whether you are involved in the education system and trying to get it adjusted to what today's children need, or you're a professional that work in the field and you're doing excellent work. Thank you to all the people that work in these fields. And it's, or maybe you don't have children yourself, but you've got children in your family, or your friends have got children. It's like everybody has their part to play, and it's just us trying to communicate to people that this situation is huge and we really need to do something about it, and we can do something about it.
Definitely. And, you know, education is the only way forward. You know, we can't lock everybody up. You know, here in Australia, they've put up statistics to say that in the last year alone, online grooming is up 120%.
Yeah.
You cannot be locking everybody up.
Yeah.
But if we can be having these open conversations with both adults and with children. I sell a book called Everyone's Got a Bottom, and in it is the word penis, vulva, vagina, etc. The amount of adults that have bought it from me and then either rung or emailed say, look, Holly, I bought that book. I can't read that to my 5-year-old. And I say, well, if you can't say the words, how can we expect a 5-year-old to say those words? We need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because our children are suffering. And if we don't give them, you know, the language, they can't tell us.
I wonder where the embarrassment around those words came from, because it's in us all. Yeah, it's in us all. And I wonder where it's come from. It would be interesting to get an expert on that, because culturally, it's an embarrassment for us to say those words in front of a youngster, a young person, a young child. But they're just another organ on our body. They're just a sexual organ. They're just a part of the body. You know, we talk about, you know, what we teach, what the ear does. We teach what the eye does. We teach what the mouth does. We teach what. I mean, we're even a bit embarrassed to teach what nipples are, you know, and why is that? There may have been a reason back in the day. There may have been, or maybe it's because as children, I don't know the answer because it's complex, but we just need to get rid of it. We just need to get rid of it. We teach what an arm does. We teach what muscles are. We teach what bones are. Let's teach what a penis is and what it does, what its function is. You know, we haven't got to get all. That's it. What it is and what its function is, because then, like you say, if they understand, if we can explain that to them in an open and honest way as it is, then if anything ever happens to them, they feel open and honest to talk back to us.
I love the fact that you're talking about that, because one of the things that I teach kids is something called their early warning signs, the body reactions that we get, like your heart beats fast and your legs feel like jelly. And you've lived this, so you'll know what I'm talking about. But a lot of experts believe boys are more sexually abused than girls. Boys are just less likely to tell us, because when a boy's touched, the body reacts in a certain way. And there's a lot of shame around that. So I've talked to lots of male survivors and they say, Holly, am I gay? You know, I had questions, am I gay? You know, and we get goosebumps when we're cold. Our tummy rumbles when we're hungry. Our penis, when our bodies touch us, our penis goes hard. It doesn't mean you liked it. It doesn't mean you asked for it. We need to teach young people that, because that's where a lot of the shame comes, in my experience. And correct me if you feel because I don't have one. So, but for me, when I've talked to, male survivors, they say that's where the shame came all around. My body reacted in a certain way and I blame myself.
Absolutely. And we have got too much, we are thinking too much that sexual abuse towards a child is a physical act of violence, because I don't think that it's ever really like that. I think it's very rarely like that. It's
they wouldn't keep it a secret if it was like that.
Yes. It's a soft, comforting process. It's reassuring. It's sometimes nice for the child. It's not causing them physical pain all the time. If there's no penetration, there's no physical pain. Right? So let's take a child who's 6 years old, which makes us feel so uncomfortable to think about, but you can make them feel incredible physical sensations. The abuser can make them feel touch, hug, feel, kiss, all of those things. Now, once that abuse is finished, and that person who was 6 years old is now 30 years old, and they're a male, and they're a heterosexual male, and it was a male that did this to them when they were 6 years old, this is where you find the barriers in speaking out, because quite obviously that is embarrassing, that is shameful, that is disgusting for that person to think about what happened to them when they were a child. And that's why we're finding you're getting, I don't know what the average is, 25 years until people are speaking out, until they get to a level in their life where they feel like enough is enough. I'm going to tell a few people. Some people, many people, I believe, go to the grave never telling anybody because it's just too uncomfortable to even just dive into.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you think that your child would tell you if something was happening to them, this situation is more complex than that. You know, it's not that they're going to tell you that their friend in the playground said a naughty word, right? This is something a lot more complex. It's so psychological. And that's why I feel like when we're having conversations like this, when you're going into schools, when I'm trying to put out work on my social media platforms, the more people that see that, the more we're just breaking down this stigma. I received a message yesterday from a 16-year-old saying that since following myself and people like you and all, you know, once you follow one person, Instagram or platforms like that will suggest more people like that to you. And he said, since seeing you people speaking about this so openly, it led me to understand that I can speak about this more openly. He's 16 years old. Yeah, this is going on generation after generation after generation. And we are brilliant as people of advancing technology, cars, houses, our lives. But this thing is getting left behind. We're in the Stone Age when it comes to this situation. And that's one of the things that I've dedicated my life to changing.
Jeremy, thank you so much for, I think that's an amazing way to end this. Thank you so much for giving me your time. I know you've got lots of meetings today. We'll keep talking. Really, you know, I just love what you're putting out, and I'll share links to all of your socials because, you know, I'm always trying to share it as well. You know, you're phenomenal on LinkedIn and all of the other platforms. So thank you so much for giving me your time. Keep up the great work. I've got my fingers crossed that you'll get more grants because you deserve it with the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's so nice to be connected with you. We've known each other a couple of years now, so we see how each other are evolving. Let's keep in contact and yeah, fantastic. Thank you for the conversation.